Welcome back everybody, and for this video we're going to look at area of composite figures. First, it helps just to know what exactly a composite figure is. A composite figure is a figure that's made up of two or more common shapes. So for example, in our picture we have this double-sided arrow, and this double-sided arrow is really just made up of a bunch of simple shapes. It's made up of two triangles and one rectangle. And we know the formula for figuring out the area of these simple shapes. So what we can do to find out the area of the more complicated composite figure is to find out the area of my two triangles, find the area of my rectangle, and then add them all together. And that will give me the area of my composite figure. So let's take a look at our first example. In my first example, I have this shape to the right. And this shape is just, if I were to draw a line down the middle, this shape is just a rectangle and a triangle put together. So what I can do is I can find the area of each of these easier shapes and then add them together to find my total area of the composite figure. So I want to start by writing out the two shapes that I have here. I have a rectangle and I have a triangle. Both of these shapes I already know my formula is for, and I can find the area of pretty simply. For a rectangle, my formula is area equals length times width, and for a triangle I have area equals 1/2 the base times the height. Okay, and we talked about those in our previous video. So for area of a rectangle, I find my length. My length is 16 centimeters. I find my width. My width is how tall it is or how wide it is. It's 7 centimeters. And I just multiply those two numbers together because that's my formula, length times width. And when I multiply 16 times 7, I get 112. And my units are centimeters, and area is always squared. So that's my rectangle. Now I need to find the area of the triangle. Okay, the triangle isn't quite as easy to find the base and the height. They don't come out and just tell you, but we can make a guess, or we can make we can figure it out based on the information we have available to us. So we know that the base of the entire rectangle is 16 centimeters, and we know that this part is 8 centimeters. Well, that means that my section here has to be the rest of it. Okay, so something I'm adding to 8 to give me 16 centimeters, which we all should know is 8 centimeters. So the base of my triangle is 8 centimeters. The height, well, if this part here is 7 and the entire thing from top to bottom is 13, that means this part here has to be the rest of it. Okay, so 7 plus something gives me 13. Okay, and I should be able to figure out that that is 6. So now I have all the information I need to find my area of my triangle. Okay, I plug in my information into my formula. Area equals 1/2. Base we figured out is 8. The height we figured out is 6. And then we're just multiplying. And remember, it doesn't matter what order you multiply in. You can multiply 8 times 6 and then take half of it. You can multiply half of 8 or half of 6 first. Whatever you want to do. I would like to multiply just half of an even number first. So I'll do 1/2 times 8, which is 4, and then 4 times 6, which gives me 24 centimeters squared. Now I have the area of my rectangle, the area of my triangle. My total area is then just what I get when I add those two numbers together. So I have 112 plus 24. When I add them together, I get 136 centimeters squared. Okay, so I break it apart into smaller parts. I find the area of each of those smaller parts, and then I add it together. Let's take a look at one more example before you try it on your own. So what we have here is what looks like a couple of rectangles put together. And sometimes on composite figures, there are multiple ways to break them apart. For example, if I wanted to break apart this figure, I could break it apart into two rectangles this way, or I could break it apart into two rectangles that way. Whatever is easiest for you. So I'm going to break it apart long ways because that's the way I like to look at it. Okay, this first rectangle, so I have rectangle 1. I have rectangle 2. And then I have my total area, which is just both of my rectangles added together. Okay, so I'm going to call this rectangle 1. And rectangle 1 is just length times width, which in this case is 20 times 60. And I multiply 20 times 60 together, and I get 1,200. So this spot here is 1,200. I need to figure out this second spot on my triangle, or my rectangle, sorry, second rectangle. I know that my width is 30, and that my whole length is 60, but I don't want to count this part, which we know is 20 feet. That means the rest of it has to be 40 feet. Okay, so my area is still length times width. Okay, in this case now though I have 30 and 40, so I do 40 times 30. Okay, and 40 times 30 is also 1,200. So I have 1,200 for the first rectangle, 1,200 feet squared for my second rectangle, and my total is just when I add those two together. So I do 1,200 plus 1,200 is 2,400. My unit, as always, is squared, and this one is feet, so it's 2,400 feet squared. Take a second to do the next problem on your own, and then continue the video and I will go over it with you. So for this one, you should break it up into two smaller rectangles. You can do it a bunch of different ways, but that's the way I'm going to break them apart. So I have this bigger rectangle and this skinny longer rectangle. Either way, both rectangle 1 and rectangle 2, which it doesn't matter which one you call rectangle 1 or rectangle 2, because you're just going to add them together anyway at the end. But our formula for area of a rectangle is area equals length times width. So I fill that in, and then I fill in the missing information. So for my first rectangle, I'm going to call this one rectangle 1. I have 8 meters is my width, 4 meters is my length. So I just plug that in. Area equals 8 times 4. 8 times 4 is 32. For my second rectangle, my length is 6, and my width I have to figure out. Okay, this part total is 8. This part is 3. This part is 3. So 3 plus 3 plus something. Let me use a question mark instead of a 0. Plus something has to equal 8. And obviously that missing thing is 2. That means that this has to be 2 meters. So I get area equals length is 6, width is 2, 6 times 2, which means my area is 12 meters squared. And now I just have to find the total of my two rectangles. Okay, so for my total, I add my first rectangle, 32 meters squared, plus my second rectangle, which is 12 meters squared, and I get 44 meters squared. Okay. All right, so now we have to kind of talk about how to use them in a word problem, because it's great to be able to find area, but then we need to know how to use that for our advantage, or what we're even going to use it for. So let's look at this example. It says Emma is planting a rose garden with the following dimensions, and it's pictured in the bottom right corner. If one bag of mulch covers 12 square feet, how many bags will she need? Okay, right in our question, by them telling us that we are using square feet, is giving us a hint that we're going to be finding area. So one bag of mulch, if she were to spread one bag of mulch, she would cover 12 square feet. We need to figure out how many bags she would need to buy to cover her entire rose garden. So the first thing we need to do is figure out what the area of the rose garden is. So our rose garden is really just 2 rectangles. Okay, we have rectangle 1. I'm just going to write rectangle 1. We have rectangle 2. And then we have our total area, which is just when we add those two together. So for rectangle 1, we have a length of 15 and a height of 9. Okay, so the length is 15, the width is 9, and then I have to do 15 multiplied by 9, which is 135. And again, feet squared. For my second rectangle, I have a length of 24 meters. And they don't tell me my width, but I can figure it out again based off the information. Because my total width is 18, and this part is 9, which means this part has to be 9 plus something gives me 18. So this side would have to then be 9 feet. So my length is 24. My width is 9. And then I have to be able to figure out what 24 multiplied by 9 is, which when I do my multiplication is 216. So that means that this bottom rectangle is 216 feet squared. Okay, that means my total is, I have to add my 2 rectangles together, 216 plus 135. Gives me 351 feet squared. Okay, now each bag of mulch is 12 square feet. So to figure out how many bags she'll need to cover 351 square feet, I have to divide 351 divided by 12. Okay, and figure out how many bags she's gonna have to buy. Okay, so 12 goes into 35 2 times. That leaves me with 111. And then 12 goes into 111 9 times. 9 times 12 is 108. I have a remainder of 3. So it would be 29 bags, but then there would still be a little bit of space left over. So she can't just not cover that with mulch. She would have to buy an extra bag, even though she wouldn't use the entire bag. She would still have to buy an extra bag for that 3 feet left over, that 3 square feet that wasn't covered. So that means she would need 30 bags of mulch. Okay, so that is finding area of composite figures. The easy way to think about it is you break it up into smaller parts, find the area each of those smaller parts, and then find the total. Okay, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please ask me.